Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 19th of December 2018 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today has been presented on the screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. Now these two articles appear on page number 1 as well as page number 3. These two articles basically deal with the farm loan waivers. Even though these articles are political in nature, but as a civil service aspirant, you should be aware of the fact that the farm loan waivers are at best a temporary solution to solve the present agrarian distress. And more importantly, the farm loan waivers not only hurt the Indian economy, but it also has an adverse impact on the creation of the capital assets in the Indian agriculture. Hence, these articles become important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Economy under the subsection Indian Economy and Various Issues. Further, a expected UPSC mains question from this particular topic could be: the farm loan waivers fail to address the structural problems of the Indian agriculture and can be considered to be only a temporary solution to the present agrarian distress. Discuss. Hence, as part of this video analysis, let us discuss about the economics of the farm loan waiver by keeping aside the political imperatives. The agriculture sector in India is considered to the backbone of the Indian economy. This is because even though the Indian agriculture contributes only 14% to India's GDP, it employs around 49% of its workforce, which clearly shows that if India is to achieve its dream of inclusive growth, then the development of agriculture sector becomes extremely crucial. However, the agriculture sector in India is presently facing a lot of structural problems. Some of these structural problems are the fragmented land holdings, the rising input cost, the decline in productivity, the inefficient marketing infrastructure, that is mainly the APMCs, poor irrigation facilities, etc. For example, out of the total 326 million hectares of land in India, 141 million hectares of land is presently devoted towards the agriculture related activities. And out of these 141 million hectares, only 45% of the land is irrigated. On the other hand, the remaining 55% of agriculture land even today is rain fed, which clearly shows that even today the Indian agriculture is dependent upon the monsoons. Hence, whenever there has been decrease in the rainfall due to the weak monsoons, the agriculture sector in India has come under immense stress, leading to the decline in the productivity. Similarly, the APMCs in India have proved to be one of the major hurdle for the development of the marketing infrastructure. And because of various restrictions imposed by the APMCs on the marketing of agriculture products by the farmers are not able to get the fair and remunerative prices on their agriculture products. For example, according to a recent study, the farmers are able to get only 1/3 of the prices which are paid by the consumers, and most of the profits are pocketed by the middlemen and the traders. The other example being the fragmented land holdings. Due to the growing population as well as the increasing pressure on the agriculture land, the per capita land availability for the agriculture has been on decline, because of which almost 86% of the farmers in India belong to small and marginal category, wherein the amount of land which they hold is less than 2 hectares. Now the fragmented land holdings becomes problem for the Indian agriculture because the small and marginal farmers find it difficult to avail loans from the banks, leading to decline in the investment in agriculture and overall a decline in the productivity. Now these are some of the problems which are presently afflicting the Indian agriculture. And because of these problems, the farmers in India are facing the rural indebtedness, which means to say that the farmers who have taken the loans are not in a position to repay them back. And this has in turn led to increase in the number of the farmers' suicides. And accordingly, the farmer groups across the country have been demanding for the farm loan waivers. Now the farm loan waiver essentially means that either the central government or the state government takes over the liability of the farmer to repay back the loans to the banks. And by taking over the liability of the farmers, the central or the state government repays back the loans to the banks on behalf of the farmers. And these farm loan waivers could either be a complete waiver or a partial waiver. In case of a partial waiver, only a certain part of the loan would be paid back by the government and the remaining amount shall be paid back by the farmer. Further, the farm loan waivers are usually selective, wherein they can target only certain categories of the farmers. And more importantly, the farm loan waivers would be applicable to only those farmers who have taken loans from certain sources, such as the scheduled banks or the cooperative banks. And the farm loan waivers are usually not applicable for the loans taken by the farmers from the informal sources, such as the money lenders, microfinance institutions, etc. So the idea behind the farm loan waiver is to reduce the rural indebtedness so as to reduce the farmers' suicides. However, it is being said that the farm loan waivers fail to address these structural problems of the Indian agriculture, and at best they can be considered to be only a temporary solution to the present agrarian distress. In this regard, let us try to understand various problems which can be associated with the farm loan waivers. One of the main problems associated with the farm loan waivers is that it leads to the willful default on loans by the farmers. This is because the farmers keep on anticipating or expecting that the government will waive off the loans which they have taken from the banks. And because of this expectation of the loan waive off, even those farmers who have the capability to repay back the loans would not repay back the loans, leading to the willful default. Further, the farm loan waivers also erodes the credit culture in the economy. Let's understand this concept of erosion of credit culture by an example. Let us consider two farmers, farmer A and farmer B. The farmer A has repaid back the previous loans to the bank. However, the farmer B has defaulted on his loans. So when a government announces a loan waiver, such a loan waiver would be benefiting the farmer B. However, it would not be benefiting the farmer A. So in future, if farmer A takes loans from a bank, he would not repay back the loans in the anticipation that the government would announce a loan waiver. So this clearly shows that the credit culture of the farmer A has got adversely affected due to the announcement of the loan waiver. Hence, because of the willful default as well as the erosion of credit culture in the economy, there would be increase in the non-performing assets of the banks. And this increase in the non-performing assets was seen between 2009 to 2012, wherein the NPAs of the banks increased by almost 3 times. Further, according to a study conducted by the World Bank, banks usually give less amount of loans to those sectors where the NPAs or the non-performing assets are highly concentrated, which clearly shows that as the non-performing assets of the Indian agriculture increases, the banks would be less inclined to give loans for the agriculture sector, leading to decline in the credit flow and a further decline in the investment, leading to an overall decline in the productivity of the agriculture. So this particular study of the World Bank clearly highlights that the farm loan waivers in India, instead of addressing the agrarian distress, would lead to decline in the productivity. Further, it can be argued that the farm loan waivers have not benefited even the farmers as well. This is because if one looks at the data provided by the National Crime Records Bureau, we can clearly see that there is no clear linkage between the loan waivers as well as the farmer suicides, which means that even in those states where the waivers have been announced in the past, the farmer suicides have not reduced. In fact, some of the states where the loan waivers have been announced, in those states the farmer suicides have increased. So this peculiar aspect of increase in the farmer suicides in spite of the loan waivers can be seen because the loan waivers have a limited outreach, wherein the loan waivers mainly cater to those farmers who have availed the institutional finance from the banks, which means that those farmers who have taken loans from informal sources such as the money lenders are not covered under the loan waivers. And if one looks at the agricultural credit market in India, it is mostly dominated by the informal sources of lending. And the farmers who mainly commit suicide are those farmers who may have taken loan from the informal sources of lending and are not covered under the farm loan waivers. So this clearly shows that the farm loan waivers in India have not only led to decline in the productivity and has also not benefited the farmers. Further, the farm loan waivers put an additional burden on the government, wherein the government would be required to pay back the loans taken by the farmers to the banks. because of which the overall borrowings of the government increases. And this increase in the borrowings of the government leads to both increase in the fiscal deficit as well as the crowding out effect. Now, the crowding out effect simply means that as the government borrowings increases, the private sector investment in an economy reduces. This is because as the government borrows more amount of money, the money supply in the economy reduces, because of which the rate of interest on the loans increases. And this increase in the rate of interest on the loans leads to the decrease in the private sector investment. So the principle of crowding out effect explains the fact that as the government's borrowing increases, the private sector investment in the economy reduces. Similarly, as the government borrowing increases, the fiscal deficit increases, leading to increase in the rate of inflation. And as the rate of inflation in the economy increases, the overall GDP growth rate reduces. So we can clearly see here that the farm loan waivers would lead to decline in the GDP growth rate as well as the decline in the private sector investment. One has to understand that in order to solve the present agrarian distress, the government is required to invest more amount of money in capital assets such as creation of more irrigation facilities such as canals, higher amount of investment in storage facilities such as godowns, as well as the marketing infrastructure such as the APMCs, roads, etc. For example, India is considered to be one of the leading producer of food grains, wherein the annual production of food grains is around 250 million tons. However, the storage facilities in India have proved to be inadequate. Similarly, as discussed, the Indian agriculture is mainly dependent on monsoons. So accordingly, the government is required to invest in the construction of canals. However, what is happening right now is that because of the increase in the farm loan waivers, the government has less amount of money to address these structural problems. So some important aspects which we can conclude from this particular discussion is that the farm loan waivers have failed to address the structural problems of the Indian agriculture. It has led to increase in the fiscal deficit as well as the crowding out effect. It has not benefited the farmers as in spite of the loan waivers, the farmer suicides have increased in some of the states. It has led to decline in the productivity of agriculture. And finally, it has led to willful default on loans as well as the erosion of credit culture. So these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to problems with the farm loan waivers in India. So as we have discussed, the farm loan waivers are only a temporary solution to the problem. Hence, the government has to find a permanent solution to solve the present problem of agrarian distress. And as part of this permanent solution, the government has to focus on the pricing policy, the marketing infrastructure, as well as the reducing vulnerability of the Indian agriculture. In order to ensure fair and remunerative prices to the farmers, the government is declaring the minimum support price. However, it is being said that in spite of declaration of MSP, the farmers in India are not able to get the correct prices of their agricultural goods. And more importantly, the MSP is not benefiting the small and marginal farmers. Hence, accordingly, the government has to ensure the proper implementation of the recently launched scheme known as the PM Asha, which stands for the Pradhan Mantri Annadata A Sanrakshan Abhiyan. Similarly, as we have discussed, the APMCs in India have proved to be a major hurdle for the development of an agricultural marketing infrastructure. Hence, accordingly, the government has to focus on bringing about the APMC reforms. Similarly, the government of India is implementing the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana in order to reduce the vulnerability of the Indian agriculture. However, this particular scheme is facing certain implementation challenges. For example, presently, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana has been made mandatory only for those farmers who have taken loans from the banks. However, it is not mandatory for those farmers who have not taken the loans. And because of this, the coverage under the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana has been quite lower. Further, there has been undue delay in the payment of compensation to the farmers covered under this particular scheme. Hence, the government is required to address these implementation challenges in order to reduce the agrarian distress. And it is to be noted that if the government is able to implement this scheme effectively, then the need for farm loan waivers would be drastically cut down. So these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, these two questions would be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The first question here is, consider the following statements related to the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. The first statement is, the premium to be paid by the farmers under the scheme is same for both Kharif as well as the Rabi crops. Now, even though this particular aspect of the scheme was not discussed in the video, you are required to understand that the premium which is to be paid by the Kharif crops is 2%. However, for the Rabi crops, it is 1.5%. Hence, this particular statement is wrong. The second statement reads as, the scheme provides for compulsory coverage of the farmers who avail the institutional loans. And as we have discussed, this particular statement is correct. The third statement reads as, the scheme covers both sharecroppers as well as the tenant farmers. Now you should know that even this particular statement is also correct. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is 2 and 3 only. Now coming to second question, the question is, which among the following can be associated with the crowding out effect? Increase in government borrowings, increase in private sector investment, and increase in the rate of interest. And as we have discussed, the crowding out effect leads to decline in the private sector investment. So option number 2 is wrong. However, both option number 1 and 3 are correct. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is C, that is 1 and 3 only. Further, based upon our discussion, you can try writing answer to this expected UPSC mains question. With this, let us now move to the next article. Now the next article appears on page number 10. The title of the article is, Tamil Nadu government's consent not needed for the grant of the terms of reference for the new Mullaperiyar Dam. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of both GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. Under GS paper 2, it shall be part of governance, whereas under GS paper 3, it shall be part of the disaster management. Before analyzing this particular article, let us first understand as to what this article states. Presently, the Mullaperiyar Dam is located in state of Kerala, but it is operated by the Tamil Nadu. However, this particular dam is more than 120 years old, because of which concerns have been raised by Kerala regarding its safety. Hence, because of the safety concerns associated with the old dam, the Kerala government has proposed to set up a new dam at the Mullaperiyar, and this new dam would be replacing the old existing dam. And for this proposal of the Kerala government, the Ministry of Environment and Forest had earlier come out with the terms of reference for carrying out the environmental impact assessment. However, this environmental impact assessment was opposed by the state of Tamil Nadu, since its consent was not being taken into account. However, now the central government has stated that the consent of Tamil Nadu government was not needed for rebuilding the dam at Mullaperiyar. So from the exam perspective, we shall basically focus on 3 aspects related to the article. Firstly, we'll understand certain basic details related to the Mullaperiyar Dam, the concerns related to the dam, and finally we'll look into the nature of conflict between Kerala and Tamil Nadu over the Mullaperiyar Dam. Let us start analyzing these aspects of the article one by one. The Mullaperiyar Dam is basically a gravity dam which has been built on the Periyar River in the state of Kerala. Now the gravity dams are basically those dams which use their weight as well as the force of gravity of the earth to hold the reservoir. And this particular dam is more than 120 years old. And one peculiar feature related to this particular dam is that even though it is located in Kerala, it is operated and maintained by the state of Tamil Nadu. This has been provided under the 999 years lease agreement which was signed between the erstwhile Maharaja of Travancore and the British government. And this particular dam has been basically built using the limestone and surki. Surki is basically a mixture of the burnt big powder, sugar as well as calcium oxide. And one important aspect which you should note from the prelims perspective is that the Periyar National Park is located near the dam's reservoir. Now coming to the concerns related to Mullaperiyar Dam. Now when this dam was constructed, this particular dam was envisaged to have a lifetime of only 50 years. But as you can see, this dam is presently more than 120 years old, because of which concerns related to safety of this particular dam have been raised by the state of Kerala. Further, you need to note that the construction techniques used in this particular dam are quite outdated, because of which concerns have been raised with respect to the seepages and leakages from this particular dam. And more importantly, this particular dam is located in a seismically active zone, which means to say that it is prone to the earthquakes. Because of these concerns, the Mullaperiyar Dam is considered to be a water bomb. This is because if this particular dam breaks, it would be releasing almost 180 times more energy than that released by the atomic bombs. So as you can clearly see here, this particular Mullaperiyar Dam poses a grave danger to the life and property of the people. Let us now look into the nature of conflict between Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Now, because of the problems which we discussed about the Mullaperiyar Dam, the Kerala government has proposed to construct a new dam by undertaking all the necessary expenses. Further, the Kerala has also promised to provide the same level of water to state of Tamil Nadu. However, this proposal of the Kerala government to construct a new dam has been opposed by Tamil Nadu. This is because the government of Tamil Nadu believes that the old existing dam can be strengthened by undertaking the repair and maintenance works. Further, this particular dam is considered to be extremely critical for Tamil Nadu because it helps Tamil Nadu to meet the water needs of the drought prone districts such as Shivaganga, Theni, Madurai, etc., for which the government of Tamil Nadu does not want to lose control over this particular dam. Apart from that, the government of Tamil Nadu has also been asking for the increase in the dam height. However, this increase in the dam height has been in turn opposed by the Kerala government. This is because the Kerala government believes that the dam is quite old and any increase in its height would increase the chances of the dam related disaster. However, as the title of this particular article suggests, the Ministry of Environment and Forest has come out with terms of reference to carry out the environmental impact assessment for the Kerala government for the construction of new dam. However, this has once again been opposed by the state of Tamil Nadu. So this particular news is essentially a news in transition. So let us wait and watch as to what will be the outcome with respect to the Mullaperiyar Dam issue. So these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, this would be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to Mullaperiyar Dam. The first statement is, this dam is located on the river Pamba in the state of Kerala. Now this particular statement is wrong because as we have discussed, this dam is located on the river Periyar. However, as we have discussed, both statement number 2 as well as 3 are correct. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is B, that is 2 and 3 only. Further, this particular question related to the Mullaperiyar Dam has been asked in the test series program conducted by Rao's IAS. So in order to enable you to write this particular answer, we have included the recommended answer structure as well as the answer hints in the PDF provided to you. So please go to the PDF in order to write answer to this particular question. With this, let us now move to the next article. Now, this particular article appears on page number 6. The title of the article is, The National Green Tribunal wraps the ministry over the groundwater notification. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS paper 3 environment under the subsection environmental conservation. Now this particular article has appeared in the newspaper because recently the Ministry of Water Resources has come out with a notification related to the extraction of the groundwater in India. And as per this notification, the Ministry of Water Resources has imposed a water conservation fee on the groundwater extraction industries. So all the industries which extract the groundwater are liable to pay the water conservation fee. And as the name suggests, the proceeds from this particular fee would be used for the artificial recharge of the groundwater. Further, the water conservation fee would be dependent upon the category of the area, the type of industry, as well as the quantum of groundwater which is being extracted. However, this particular notification of the Ministry of Water Resources has been criticized on account of number of reasons. For example, the agriculture sector, which accounts for the highest consumption of the groundwater, has been exempted from the payment of the water conservation fee. Secondly, the National Green Tribunal has stated that the imposition of the water conservation fee would not lead to the reduction in the groundwater usage. This is because the industries which use the groundwater would not mind paying the extra water conservation fee. Hence, the NGT has said that this particular measure of imposing the water conservation fee was not enough to curb the groundwater extraction. Further, according to the notification, the water conservation fee which is collected shall be transferred to an authority for the recharge of the groundwater. However, presently no such authority has been assigned to monitor the quality of the groundwater recharge. So this clearly shows that there is lack of preparedness in using the proceeds from the water conservation fee. Apart from this, earlier an expert committee headed by Mihir Shah had submitted its recommendations to the government for the efficient conservation of water in India. In this regard, let us look at some of the recommendations of the Mihir Shah committee. Now, presently in India, we have mainly two bodies which are dealing with the water conservation, and these are the Central Water Commission and the other one is the Central Groundwater Board, wherein the Central Water Commission is mainly responsible for coordinating with the states for the implementation of the schemes related to the efficient conservation and utilization of water resources. On the other hand, the Central Groundwater Board is mainly responsible for the assessment of groundwater and to implement various policies for the sustainable management of groundwater. Now, what Mihir Shah Expert Committee has suggested is that these two bodies should get merged into a single body which would be known as National Water Commission. And the main rationale for the merger of these two bodies is that the merger of these bodies would help us in the collective management of both groundwater as well as the surface water. And the National Water Commission shall be responsible for the formulation of water policy, data, as well as governance related to the water. And its key functions shall include incentivizing the state governments to implement the irrigation projects in a reform mode, to map the aquifers across the country, and to take up the management of the groundwater and also undertake specific programs for the rejuvenation of the rivers. And as you can clearly see here, the National Water Commission shall be dealing with both surface water as well as the groundwater, and thus enabling us to have a collective management of both these water resources. Further, in order to prevent the unchecked extraction of groundwater, the Mihir Shah Committee has suggested for a participative groundwater management. It is to be noted that such a participatory groundwater management of the aquifers has been adopted in certain states such as Andhra Pradesh. Further, this particular committee has also suggested certain corrective measures in order to check the overexploitation of the groundwater. Some of the corrective measures which this particular committee has suggested includes establishing the required drilling depth, the distance between the wells, and adoption of cropping pattern of the agriculture in such a manner that it does not lead to the over withdrawal of groundwater resources. So these are some of the recommendations given by the Mihir Shah Expert Committee on Water Conservation. Now, the recommendations given by the Mihir Shah Committee can be used by you while writing an answer in the UPSC mains related to the water conservation in India. So these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. So having analyzed all the aspects related to this particular article, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 7. The title of the article is Center Drafts the Child Protection Policy. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2 Governance under the subsection Government Policies and Interventions. As you know, there have been growing incidents of the sexual abuse of the children, particularly in shelter homes. So in order to address this particular problem, the Supreme Court of India had recently directed the central government to formulate a national child protection policy. And as the title of this particular article suggests, the central government has now come out with a draft child protection policy. So as part of this video analysis, let us look at certain basic features of the draft child protection policy. Now, this particular draft policy shall be applicable to all the organizations, that is both private as well as the public organizations. And under this policy, all these organizations are required to formulate a code of conduct, and this code of conduct should be based upon the policy of zero tolerance of child sexual abuse. Further, the policy states that the organizations have to ensure that their staff do not use any inappropriate language or behavior to harass the children. And in order to ensure the compliance of the code of conduct, the policy provides that all these organizations have to designate a dedicated staff member who shall be responsible for the implementation of the policy. Further, this particular policy has also set up a child helpline which could be used by the organizations to report incident of the child sexual abuse. However, it is to be noted that this particular policy has not been finalized yet and it is still in the drafting stages. Further, the Ministry of Women and Child Development has sought the opinion from all the stakeholders. So this particular article becomes a news in transition. So let us wait and watch as to what would be the final outcome of the National Child Protection Policy. After going through some of the articles in detail, let us now look at some of the news snippets which would be important mainly from the prelims perspective. You can find the important headlines of the today's newspaper on the daily news headlines which has been uploaded on the Rouse IAS website. Let us start discussing the news snippets one by one. So if you look at the business section on page number 15, there are mainly two articles which are important from the prelims perspective. The first article is basically about the open market operations. On the other hand, the second article is about the Banks Board Bureau. This particular article here basically highlights that the RBI is carrying out the open market operations in order to infuse more amount of liquidity into the economy. This is mainly on account of the liquidity crunch which is being faced by the NBFCs in India. So open market operations is basically a monetary policy tool used by the RBI in order to control the total amount of money supply in the economy. And the open market operations may involve either the selling or purchase of government securities by the RBI. So when the RBI sells the government securities to the bank, the RBI would be sucking out the excess amount of money from the economy. And usually such an operation is carried out during a higher rate of inflation. On the other hand, when the RBI purchases the government securities from the banks, the RBI would be injecting the money into the economy. And such an operation may be carried out by the RBI during an economic slowdown or particularly when the economy is facing a liquidity crunch. Based upon the discussion which we had, this would be a prelims question for the practice. Please try to solve this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, which among the following actions can be taken by the RBI to control the amount of inflation in the economy? The first option is increase in the repo rate. As you know, the repo rate is basically the rate of interest at which the RBI gives loans to the banks. So as the repo rate in the economy increases, the banks would be taking less amount of loans from the RBI, because of which the money supply in the economy would reduce. So this particular option is correct. The second option is increase in the SLR. The statutory liquidity ratio is basically the percentage of depositors' money which the banks would be required to keep with themselves. So as the SLR increases, the amount of money available for the banks to give away loans reduces. And accordingly, the money supply in the economy reduces, leading to control of inflation. So even this particular option is also correct. The third option says sale of government securities under the open market operations. And as we have discussed, by selling the government securities, the RBI would be able to suck out the excess money from the economy. Hence, looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is D. The next article here states that in spite of the repeated call by the Banks Board Bureau, the post of CEO in the Canara Bank has remained vacant. So from the prelims perspective, one would be required to understand about the Banks Board Bureau. The Banks Board Bureau has basically been set up based upon the recommendations of the PJ Nayak Committee to improve the governance framework of the public sector banks in India. And this particular Banks Board Bureau is part of the Indradhanush plans, which is basically a 7-pronged strategy adopted by the government to improve the governance framework of the public sector banks, wherein the main role of the Banks Board Bureau is to recommend the names for the heads of the public sector banks. And secondly, it would also help the banks in devising the strategies for raising the capital. So based upon our discussion, this would be a prelims question for your practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to the Banks Board Bureau. And as we have discussed, the first statement here is correct. However, if you look at the second statement reads as, it has been empowered to appoint the heads of the public sector banks in India. And as we have discussed, the Banks Board Bureau is actually a recommendatory body and it is not empowered to appoint the heads of the public sector banks. Ultimately, the heads of the public sector banks are appointed by the government. Hence, this particular statement is wrong. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is A, that is 1 only. Now coming to page number 1, we have already discussed this particular article related to farm loan waivers. And the next article, which is important from the prelims perspective, would be the genetic ID for the jumbos. With respect to this particular article, we should know mainly three things. In the state of Kerala, the DNA profiling of the captive elephants has been undertaken for the first time in India. And as part of its DNA profiling, a unique ID is being given to the captive elephants in Kerala. And this DNA profiling is being carried out by the Rajiv Gandhi Center for Biotechnology. And the main intention of giving a unique ID for the captive elephants is that it would help the authorities in solving cases related to the poaching and illegal trade of elephants. Now coming to page number 3, from this particular page, the article on Ganga Sagar would be important from the prelims perspective. And as you can read here, the central government has turned down the West Bengal's government request to treat the annual Ganga Sagar Mela to be held next month on par with the Kumbh Mela. The Ganga Sagar Mela is one of the famous festivals of West Bengal. This festival is mainly celebrated during the Makar Sankranti. This particular festival is mainly celebrated in the Sagar Island, which is one of the islands located on the Ganga Delta. And as you can see in this particular image, this particular island is located along the Bay of Bengal. And it is also considered to be one of the important sites of Hindu pilgrimage. Now coming to page number 7. From this particular page, the article which would be important is the Indian Air Force shows its mastery in airlift. Now this particular article clearly highlights that the Indian Air Force has picked up 463 tons of load from Chandigarh and offloaded it in Ladakh region within 6 hours. And this was accomplished by using the C-17 Globemaster. Now the C-17 Globemaster is actually a transport aircraft which has been manufactured by the Boeing company. And India has procured this transport aircraft from USA. Now why this rapid airlift by Indian Air Force is important? Because it would help the Indian Air Force to respond to the war as well as the natural disasters. Now coming to the editorial page, the first editorial here is with respect to the conclusion of the recent climate change talks at Katowice. And this particular aspect of the climate change talks has been comprehensively been covered in our DNS dated 16th of December 2018. So you can go to this particular DNS in order to know about the Katowice climate change talks. The next article, which is important from the exam perspective, is restoring the balance. Now, this particular article has appeared in the newspaper in the context of the visit of Maldivian President Ibrahim Mohamed Solih to India. In this regard, this particular article basically discusses the Indo-Maldivian relation, and this particular aspect has been comprehensively been covered in our DNS dated the 18th of December 2018 by Ankur sir. So you can go to this particular DNS in order to know the various dynamics of relationship between India and Maldives. With this, we have come to end of today's discussion. Now let us look at the question for the day.